Let's look at the consequences of this idea of property that John Locke defined in, I think, 1689 or so. The idea extended immediately into these things, so-called enclosure map of the 18th century English countryside, depicting the town of Snaith. I don't know how it's pronounced. This is the enclosure of the commons. Okay, here is Snaith, and here is the property lines with various ownerships. There is the river, there is the ship, there is the town hall, and so on and so forth. We are now so familiar with this concept of owning a piece of land, owning a house, building a fence, and doing our gardening or whatever. This obviously has intrinsic problems of environmental degradation by creating discontinuities in exchanges of water, soil, birds, bees, etc., based on how the fencing is done. But the idea of property owned by man created many changes in the way we rule over the environment. John Locke was also bright. He noticed that people want to save for the future, and if you try to save meat or grains, or now you save real estate, of course, which is money. But if you try to do that, then there is a problem of spoilage, as you would say. So humans invented money. You could buy and sell things, but you could save money forever. It doesn't spoil. It may go up and down in value, but it doesn't spoil. And you can save infinitely for the future. Okay, so there is no switch to say this is enough, right? That's kind of another problem of what brings environmental harm. So this is the enclosure of farmlands. You can see how the land has been split into all kinds of odd shapes, rectangles, trapezoidals, triangles, and so on. So small parts of private land divided by trees, shrubs, rocks, and so forth. In India as well, this is a big problem, as family may have started with a large chunk of land. With each generation, it is split into little pieces, and then using sustainable methods like, let's say, agroforestry, which require enough space for farm pond, for trees within the agricultural cropping and so on, become almost impossible, plus fencing off and creating other issues of, as I said, soil, water, groundwater recharge, soil moisture, and so on, become just can make things really bad. Doesn't mean industrial farming with huge tracts of land is any better, because in the US and some places you can own hundreds of acres of land and do industrial farming with those huge dinosaur-looking irrigation, cropping, pesticide spraying, and so on and so forth. So it's still related to property and sealing off, right? Gandhi had said, "Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not every man's greed." In the 1920s itself, he was already thinking about sustainability and so on. This is Levittown, Pennsylvania. First master planned development in the US, built in the 1950s. Its 17,000 identical houses inaugurated a new symbol of American happiness. Suburbia, with its cookie-cutter houses, single-family homes, required freeway and oil-hungry automobile industry. So you can see, you can build a new development anywhere, cut down trees, leave little pieces of trees, and make it very friendly looking, very green looking, but you destroy habitats and you introduce lots of other problems like runoff and of course increased energy consumption, because these are nuclear family homes, individual homes which only have 2 or 3 people living, even though they are massive. So heating and cooling costs, Pennsylvania gets pretty harsh winters and also fairly warm summers, so building energy use is very high. And this is even uglier. This is a suburban sprawl, in this case outside Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a desert. You can imagine the amount of water being used by such a sprawl. Okay, they are mining groundwater because it's desert. And fortunately, US is a new colony, so they still have groundwater, but already there are huge battles for water along the Colorado River and Columbia and so on and so forth. Colorado is special because it's shared between many states and between Mexico and US. So water problems come along with that. Unsustainable American sprawl has been infectious pattern around the world. So now this is from China. China also has started building neighborhoods, and you can see here trees are put in the middle to make it feel like it's a very green place, but lots of ecological research shows that fragmented forests or vegetation are not at all the same as continuous vegetation when it comes to birds, bees, insects, soil, and so on. So there are many negative environmental impacts of doing this. These are master plan developments, but against precious environmental zones encroaching into wetlands, forests. This is a development in Kendale Lakes, Florida. It's encroaching on Everglades National Park. Okay, so large tracts of wetlands and forests which have great environmental value. Wetlands can be good carbon sequestration spots, home for migrating birds, lots of biodiversity, nice fishing grounds without harming the ecology, and so on. And this is the master plan development abutting entirely on entirely unsustainable environment like this desert in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Another dry states, New Mexico, Arizona, Las Vegas, all Utah, all dry states, but nice weather for many people, so they don't mind going and settling there, assuming that water will somehow come from somewhere, energy will somehow come from somewhere, and they can always drive out to LA or Texas or wherever else. Okay, so this idea of terra nullius, where you decide that the land is not owned by anybody and you go and colonize it, was captured in this cartoon by James Gilray. Plum Pudding in Danger, it's called. There's Napoleon and William Pitt, the UK Prime Minister. They are just splitting up the worlds. What does it mean? When the British went to Australia and decided it was terra nullius, or when the British came to the US and decided it was terra nullius, actually they were happily occupied by the indigenous people. They were not land that was not owned and used by anybody, right? So you can imagine how the definition can be used to justify colonization. If you declare it as terra nullius, you can just colonize it, and there are obviously huge consequences of such actions, as we know by now. Depending on how far back you go, there are still lots of disagreements, fights, etc. between indigenous people and the colonizers, like the Native Americans in the US, Aborigines in Australia, and so on, right? So that's what environmental damage came with, based on concepts that slowly evolved from what may be implied in the Bible and what was defined concretely by John Locke, and what was codified into national psyche by some countries.